So this is my video for chapters 4 through 6, Theory, Application, and Analysis. So for my first concept, I chose the triangle of meaning from chapter 5. I chose this concept because the actual visual representation of it makes it easier to understand, and I'll actually draw it out really quickly to show you how simple it is, and then it can be my guide for as we go through this. So here we have it. It's backwards, but yeah, so we have thought at the top, word, and thing at the bottom. So the triangle of meaning illustrates how words, thoughts, and things are all related to one another. And as you can see, there's a broken line between word and thing, and this is supposed to represent that there isn't a direct connection. They're just related to one another, and it represents that the word is not the thing. And then on the other hand, word and thoughts have a solid line because they're directly connected, and then same with thoughts and things being directly connected. So altogether, meaning exists in thoughts, not words or things, and our thoughts have meaning because with words and things we give our own personal interpretation and meaning, and we can think about, you know, the word bitch again from our previous discussion, and how that specific word can be interpreted differently from person to person. And as a listener, when you hear the word, you interpret the word the way the inside of your head pictures it due to your own personal experiences, which makes it unique to each person, whether it be a good thing or the term comes off as offensive. And that's all because we don't have the exact same personal experiences. So the book uses the example of wealth, and this doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to each person. And related to my own experience, if I say that term to my successful coworker, he will think of wealthy in terms of money. And then if I were to use this word to my family, my dad, he would say, oh, like he would think in terms of our family being wealthy in love. So yeah, interesting concept. And there are definitely times where I notice I interpret things differently than others. For example, in a previous relationship early on, he had told me I was the love of his life. And first off, I'm an overthinker, so that came into play, but I freaked out because what it meant to me was that he was going to love me for the rest of his life. And before rejecting the idea, I asked him what the phrase meant to him, and because I wanted to make sure like what it meant to him was what it meant, because to me it was something very serious. And he had said, well, during this time he loved me more than anything that he loved more than anything else that he loved. And so it was evident that we had different definitions of the words the love of my life. So the triangle of meaning can be applied to this situation because of the way it proves things and words are not directly connected. Here again, we see the word is not the thing, and what actually has meaning are our thoughts. And that is why me and the person I had a relationship with had to have a little discussion about our thoughts, because they were different, and those thoughts were different, but what was behind, what had the true meaning was behind the words. Sorry, did that make sense? So like the thoughts we had were different, but the thoughts were what had meaning, and those were behind the words. So the word meanings are set by people and by personal experience. And for example, my personal experience was my mom telling me once how heavy that phrase is, and it's more or less used for like your husband or wife or someone you may be engaged to. So that might not be true to others, and it's not how my previous relationship thought of the word either. So, but that's how it stuck for me. So in terms of usefulness for this concept, it's relatively easy to understand. I agree with how it represents relationships between thoughts, things, and words. And as from my own personal experience, the meanings are set by your own thoughts, and I've already gone into detail about that. So now I wanted to move on to some content from chapter 6, the interpersonal deception theory. I chose this theory because I thought it'd be interesting to delve a little deeper into, how we as people hide the truth. And so yeah, the interpersonal deception theory explains that there are options when it comes to deception. It can be processed by falsification, concealment, or equivocation. And so the first step is, if you've already decided that you're not going to tell the truth, so now it's choosing how to respond instead. And so I mentioned falsification, and that means that instead of telling the truth, you can falsify your response by making something else up. Another route is concealment, and in other words, you conceal, you hide, you don't include your real reasoning, so you keep the truth hidden instead to the person you are engaging with. And then lastly, there's equivocation, and you can mislead the person you're talking to by changing the subject and dodging the question or comment being made. And altogether, the theory shines light on how there are 3 different responses to deceive someone. So for example, if a friend asks you to hang out, and instead of saying you're just tired and don't want to, you come up with a make-up situation. You create fiction and tell your friend you have homework that you're going to be doing all day. So I think that people every day deceive others. For example, it could be as easy as when your boss asks how you are doing, and if you'd rather not tell him about any negativity going on in your personal life, you'll just answer with the simple, "I'm doing good." And I can say I've done that plenty of times. And it could be as simple as that. And that, just saying I'm doing good, that response includes concealment because you're hiding how you're actually feeling. And but yeah, altogether I try my best not to deceive anyone that I interact closely with. However, back in high school with strict parents, I had to find clever and different ways to avoid the truth. So if I wanted to go out and do something with my parents without my parents monitoring, I had to come up with the little lies and excuses. So, for example, I used to tell my parents I was sleeping over my friend's house so my parents wouldn't have to worry about where I was and what I was doing. And this happened on many occasions, but with one example, my parents would ask, "What are you doing tonight?" And I told my parents I was sleeping over my friends, but actually I was concealing the truth partially because I didn't want to include the fact that I was going out to a party and then sleeping over my friend's house. So I tell them, yeah, it's going to be just us girls having a pizza movie night at my friend's house, and this was creating fiction because I was making up a story about what we were going to be doing that night. And however, there was another way I could practice deception, is by equivocation, and I could have misled my parents and tell them that I don't know what I'm doing quite yet. But that way I would be dodging having to come up with an excuse in that moment to lie. But however, with my parents, they'd have a definite answer. They would need a definite answer before I could leave the house when I was younger, so they needed to know where I was at all times. So with that being said, the interpersonal deception theory applies because there are 3 potential responses that can be used to deceive my parents. Many times I would use more than one, such as within one response, and I would use concealment and falsification, so then less further questions would be asked. And yeah, because as the night goes on, I might have to get a call and have to choose yet again how I would respond without telling the truth. And so it's interesting to think about how to facilitate responses to veer from the truth. And yeah, this theory is a perfect concept to kind of explain my personal situation. So I do think this theory is valid, and the theory mentions 3 potential responses. However, I also said I think they can be intertwined together when deceiving someone. It can be all within one response, just like how I use concealment and falsification within one response to them. But it does make sense, and I do agree with it. And thanks for listening. Oops.